Useless part-timers are just an eyesore? You're fired.
That's what Manager Smith, treating me as if I were just a part-timer again, said to announce my dismissal. At that moment, I remembered the frustrations I had been silently accumulating every day, and my fists trembled. I had heard before coming to the store that part-time workers had been quitting in droves. And it was undoubtedly Smith's fault. He had driven many part-timers to resign, leading to staff shortages and forcing the headquarters to call for reinforcements. With Smith around, this situation would surely continue and eventually impact the store. Thinking this, I felt strongly that I could not just stand by and slowly took out my cell phone. Trying to remain calm, I glared at Smith and said, "So that's how it is," then made a call to a certain place. Then I began to relay things to the person who picked up, something that made even Smith quiet down. "My name is White, and I'm 42 years old. Currently, I work at the headquarters of a major retail company, Hisson Corporation. My father used to work as a store manager at a local convenience store, which was close to home, so I often stopped by after school to watch him work up close. When I entered high school and wanted to earn my own allowance, I asked my father, went through a proper interview, and started working as a part-timer. Surprisingly, I enjoyed working in that environment. So after graduation, I continued working part-time at a convenience store without pursuing a job or going to college. The following year, having become accustomed to the job, I was appointed as the leader of the part-timers and conducted my duties while providing guidance to newbies and juniors. When I turned 22, my father, seeing my hard work, suggested to me, "There's an opportunity for full-time employment," and encouraged me to become a full-time employee. Since I enjoyed working at the convenience store and had no interest in switching industries, I accepted my father's proposal and became a full-time employee. I intended to continue working as an employee at the convenience store I had been at for years. But after some time, my father reported, "The president wants to have you at the headquarters." Apparently, the president had been hearing about my work attitude from my father for a long time, and was thinking of scouting me as a full-time employee for the headquarters someday, although it meant I could no longer enjoy my convenience store duties. I was interested in working at the headquarters, so after some thought, I nodded in agreement. From the following month, I transferred to the headquarters and joined the sales department, struggling with a new job but diligently continuing my duties. As I seriously engaged in sales and got involved in various projects, I received positive evaluations from the company and gradually climbed the ranks. Over time, I began to feel the enjoyment I had while working at the convenience store and became deeply engrossed in my work. Even now, that hasn't changed. I continue my duties daily without forgetting my initial enthusiasm. Today, as usual, I received a request for help due to staff shortages from one of our convenience stores. The request came from the store manager, Smith, indicating that there had been a high turnover, ranging from new hires to long-time part-timers. Responding to the request, I headed to the site and soon began working there as a full-time employee. Arriving early at the store, I briefly introduced myself to the part-time staff while waiting for Manager Smith. When Manager Smith arrived later, I immediately went in front of him and bowed my head in greeting.
Manager Smith, good morning.
"My name is White, sent from the headquarters to assist. I look forward to working with you for a while." Smith furrowed his brow with an annoyed expression, either because that was his usual demeanor or he happened to be in a bad mood, and audibly clicked his tongue.
Huh? Are you the part-timer from headquarters? Sorry. I'm sleep-deprived and irritable, so I'd appreciate a less casual tone.
He snapped before heading straight to the back of the store to smoke right after clocking in. Even though he had requested backup himself, he was calling an employee from headquarters a part-timer. Feeling slightly uncomfortable, I thought maybe he had worked overnight yesterday and decided to give Smith some space. I then approached a part-timer who was already at the register and asked to be shown how to do the job. I waited for a while, but Smith did not come out to the store at all and didn't engage in any office work. He just kept smoking cigarettes behind the store. He was having a long phone call with someone who seemed to be a friend. Although he was supposed to start working that morning according to the shift schedule. As it got busier, the part-timers at the registers became slightly overwhelmed, but he did not show up. Struggling a bit with the work I hadn't done in a while, I still tried my best to keep up. After finally managing to get a break, I went to speak to Smith, who had not helped at all. Just then, the back door, which had been closed, suddenly opened, and he walked into the store, reeking of cigarette smoke. Several hours after clocking in, just when I thought he might start working, Smith picked up his belongings that he had left lying around and started walking towards the store exit.
Smith, what's happening?
I called out involuntarily, and he turned around and gave a wry smile.
Hey, newbie part-timer.
I worked late last night and I'm tired, so I'm heading home. Just ask the part-timers about the job details and make sure you punch out when you leave. With that, he left for home without doing any work at all. Stunned by the whole affair, I just stood there in shock. From the next day, Smith didn't show up at the store at all. He would come in and seclude himself in the office, occasionally doing some clerical work, but he spent most of his time playing games on his phone. He left all the tasks like managing the cash register, inventory control, and taking out the trash to the part-timers, never helping out even when it was busy. Whenever there was a complaint, he would just say, "Tell them the manager is out," and refuse to handle it, not fulfilling his duties as a manager beyond the bare minimum office tasks. Yet, whenever a part-timer made a mistake, he would berate them harshly, putting aside his own shortcomings.
You're the lead part-timer, aren't you?
How could you make such a basic mistake after all these years, if you can't do your job seriously? Just quit already. You're a useless failure. Unable to bear him yelling in front of customers, I led him to the back to calm him down.
Manager, there's no need to yell like that in front of customers.
When giving feedback to your team, you shouldn't scold them outright. You need to handle it politely. As an employee from headquarters, when I pointed this out, he only grew angrier.
What, you? Just a part-timer? Giving me orders? Are you kidding me? I'm the manager here? You're just a helper part-timer.
You should just keep quiet and do as I say. His tyrannical attitude left me speechless. I never expected someone who was supposed to lead the store could think like this. He doesn't do his own work properly but treats others as useless if they don't follow his orders. Having been involved in convenience store work since high school, I had never met anyone like him. Stunned into silence by the situation, Smith seemed to think I was cowed by fear. Emboldened, he began treating me like a new hire, harassing me unnecessarily, even though he had never come to the store before. Now, when I was stocking shelves or similar, he would come out just to nitpick without any real issues.
You just cleaned the bathroom, right? It was still dirty. Holla?
And you haven't disposed of the expired products yet. Don't dawdle with the stocking. Finish it up quickly. I need you to work efficiently. Smith's nitpicking increased daily, becoming a hindrance to work, and my efficiency plummeted as I couldn't focus. However, as a seasoned pro, I ignored him and continued with my tasks. Seeing my reaction, and perhaps bored of harassing me, he began finding faults with other part-timers, scolding them unreasonably and taking pleasure in their reactions. Watching the whole scene, I was dismayed and didn't know what to do. Eventually stepping in to alleviate the part-timers from their suffering. Pointing out his recent behavior again, similar to before, he exploded, "Didn't I tell you not to order me around?" Once again the target, I endured days filled with his complaints. Days passed, and despite Smith's persistent bullying, I continued my work undisturbed, and gradually the store became busier as lines formed at the registers. Today, I heard there was an event at a nearby dome-shaped venue. And Smith, anticipating the need for extra staff, had mandated everyone's attendance. Some part-timers had plans to attend today's event. But Smith threatened, "If you go out to have fun without working, you're fired." So they reluctantly gave up and came to work. Indeed, we needed staff, but there was no need to forcibly call in people who already had plans. I pointed this out to Smith, but he wouldn't listen. As the registers started to fill up, we paired up at each station to handle the customer service. Typically, when it gets this busy, something goes wrong. And soon enough, the registers, copiers, and other machines began to malfunction, requiring us to refill supplies like the self-service coffee maker and water pots. Even I was getting overwhelmed by the chaos as problems continued to arise. While I was at the register, I could hear Smith's shouts coming from the office.
What? Calling off work because you're feeling unwell? You just started a week ago. What about managing your health?
Listening to the conversation, it seemed a new part-timer scheduled for today had called in sick due to ill health. I don't know what caused their illness, but these things happen. We were managing the work well and had enough staff. It would have been nice to let them rest, but Smith wouldn't allow it.
Don't mess with me. I told you today would be busy, sick or not. Get to the store now. You're causing trouble for everyone.
On the phone, Smith showed fierce anger towards the newbie. However, the newbie, apparently running a high fever, insisted, "I really can't make it to work." Then, Smith began to spew terrible verbal abuse.
You dared defy my orders as the manager. You insolent newbie.
"I will never forgive you. You're worthless and you're fired. Don't ever show your face in front of me again. Don't come back to this convenience store ever, and you won't get paid either." Unable to tolerate his verbal assault on the newbie any longer, I left another part-timer at the register and went into the office, closing the door behind me. I took the phone from Smith and said in a calm voice,
This is White.
"You're feeling unwell, right? Just rest up today, and when you are feeling better, come back to the store." And then I hung up.
What are you doing? I've already fired him. It's best to get rid of useless part-timers quickly.
He snapped at me, but I stood my ground.
I've been listening.
"And don't you think you're being too harsh on the new part-timer? And what do you mean by not paying him, even if it was for a short time? He worked and deserves to be paid," I argued. Further angered by my composure, Smith's face turned red as he yelled,
You, after I told you not to order me around, you still continue.
"Daring to lecture me, thanks to you. I can see that even the corporate employees are useless. Useless part-timers are just in the way. You are fired." Smith, mistaking me, an employee, for a part-timer again, even went as far as to declare me fired. At that moment, I remembered the frustrations I had been accumulating day by day, felt anger, and my fists trembled. I had heard stories of part-timers quitting in droves before coming to the store. And it was undoubtedly because of Smith. He was someone who would immediately berate his subordinates or anyone around him if something displeased him. It must have been him driving many part-timers to quit, leading to staff shortages and the need for head office to send reinforcements. With Smith around, the current situation would definitely continue and eventually affect the store. Considering this, I felt strongly that I couldn't just stand by and slowly took out my cell phone. Striving to remain calm, I glared at Smith and said, "That's how it is," and then made a call to a certain place. I then began to explain things to the other party that would make the even Smith quiet down.
Hey, it's me.
"I'm at the store right now, and it turns out that all the problems are due to one man, Manager Smith. Start the dismissal procedures immediately, and I'll head back to headquarters once it's done."
Heh.
Smith was bewildered, not understanding what was happening, just watching me talk on the phone. After I hung up, he snapped back to reality and immediately questioned me.
What was that call about? Was that someone from headquarters? Why would someone like you,
A useless part-timer, be arranging a dismissal? He had many questions and demanded explanations all at once. I decided to give Smith the simple answer he hoped for.
I haven't corrected you until now, but I'm not a part-timer, nor am I just an employee.
I was recently appointed as the president.
What president?
His eyes widened in shock at the unexpected answer. Indeed, a few months ago, I was appointed as the president of Hisson Corporation, which owns this convenience store. Years ago, after I had become a full-time employee and transferred from a local convenience store to headquarters, the president, who had observed my diligent work ethic every day, made a proposal to me. He asked, "Would you like to become the president after I step down?" At the time, I was still in my late 20s and was bewildered to be considered as a candidate for the next president. The president said that he had already set his sights on me as the next president after hearing about my work from my father, who had been a store manager. After being called to headquarters and having my work observed directly, it became clear that I had a wealth of ideas, and he quickly decided to entrust me with the company. Knowing I had met the president's high standards made me feel very honored. Though I hesitated briefly, I soon accepted and promised to live up to the expectations. From the next day, I felt even more motivated at work and went on to experience various roles and departments. Recently, due to the president's age, he stepped down, and as promised, I took over as the next president. Having recently assumed the position, many employees probably don't yet recognize me. Naturally, Smith, who had been slacking off at work, did not remember my face or even my name. That's why he referred to me as a part-timer even when I came to help. When I explained the situation, he suddenly turned pale, remembering the notice about the presidential change that had been sent from headquarters. However, still having doubts and seemingly unsettled, Smith, even knowing I was the president, did not change his attitude and asked again.
Wait a minute. Then why is the president working at this store?
You could have sent another employee to help instead of coming here yourself. His comment was unusually sensible, but here my creativity, which had charmed the former president, came into play. When this convenience store requested support, I thought, what if I went undercover myself, rather than arranging for other employees to handle it? This way, I could identify problems more quickly and get a grasp of the local conditions as well. Fortunately, having just been appointed as president, I was not yet recognized by the employees outside of headquarters, so I was able to put my plan into action immediately. I immediately asked my secretary to make arrangements, and then I started my undercover operation, posing as a regular employee.
Disguised, you say? So you were deceiving us. What a ridiculous thing to do.
Smith was displeased at being deceived and glared at me, grinding his teeth. However, I was unfazed by his intimidation.
Actually, I came to this store with the purpose of going undercover.
But I managed to sufficiently address the staff shortage, didn't I? Despite how it may seem, I have experience from my high school days. So I know more than the part-timers here, and certainly more useful than you, who have been mostly slacking off. I sneered, and Smith gritted his teeth in frustration.
I can't accept this. Why would someone who deceives people be a president? And why should I be fired?
I haven't done anything wrong. Even at this point, he failed to acknowledge his faults, and I was utterly dismayed. I proceeded to detail the reasons for my decisions to Smith.
You have committed numerous misdeeds, haven't you? Even from what I've witnessed myself, there are too many to count.
As I glared at him, he began to sweat, clearly recognizing the truth of my words. During my undercover period, I thoroughly observed various situations and relentlessly noted down elements that seemed problematic, devising improvements. Especially appalling was Smith's treatment of those around him. Like the minor complaints and verbal abuses I experienced myself, he routinely did the same to other part-timers he disliked, unjustly yelling at someone almost daily. The issues were mostly about work or attitude. Any small mistake would lead to his fury. And if someone retaliated, he would scream until they cried. Additionally, while Manager Smith was absent, I checked the time cards and found that hours had been conveniently adjusted, and wages were not being paid correctly. With such a workplace environment, it's no wonder anyone would want to leave. Moreover, any part-timer he deemed incompetent was dismissed without discussion, exacerbating the staff shortage. Being on site, I truly realized how vital my undercover mission was.
I have also realized that you do not take your job seriously and look down on the corporate staff.
And I had no choice but to decide on your dismissal. If left unchecked, it would have affected the company's performance. What exactly have you been doing as a manager of this store? After explaining Smith's misdeeds, I sighed in dismay. He was unable to respond, only shaking in frustration. Despite this, Smith continued to insist on his innocence.
I was only giving instructions to the part-timers as their manager. It's natural to get angry if they don't listen.
And I fire them if they are not useful. What's wrong with that? To his indignant claim, I responded mercilessly.
That's your idea of guidance. It looked more like a child throwing a tantrum because they can't have their way.
There's an endearing quality to children, but it's pitiful from a man nearly at retirement age. As an adult male in a respectable position, you should consider other people's feelings. When I sharply confronted him with strong words, Smith instinctively backed away. Being scolded by a younger president wounded his pride and seemed to hurt him deeply. Yet, Smith was not deterred.
Shut up. Just because you're the president doesn't mean you can get cocky. You might not understand because you're younger.
But sometimes strict guidance is necessary. I'm not just yelling to relieve stress. He glared back defiantly, albeit weakly, and hesitantly responded. However, his words had no effect on me, who was unharmed by the exchange.
You might find it unbelievable since you don't understand others' feelings.
But even if you call it strict guidance, from the recipient's perspective, it's simply being yelled at, and it doesn't resonate at all. If you truly want to guide effectively, you need to empathize with the other person. But I guess that's impossible for someone who can't understand others' feelings. After cutting him off, Smith seemed even more wounded and finally quieted down. I pressed further, now that he was looking down and unable to respond.
By the way, there are other reasons for your dismissal, Smith.
You've been secretly taking products and diverting them while at the store, haven't you? He visibly started at the accusation. During my undercover stint, I quickly identified him as a key figure and intensively observed his actions. One day, when he thought no one was watching, he went to the storage where the store's goods were kept and began stuffing several items into his bag. Watching secretly, I saw Smith leave hastily with the bag, apparently satisfied with his haul. Later, when I checked the inventory, the numbers clearly didn't add up, confirming the scene I had witnessed was indeed fact. Days later, he repeated his misdeeds. Recently, I was speechless when I saw him boldly eating ice cream from the stock in the office. From his practiced manner, it was clear Smith was a habitual offender. I considered reporting him to headquarters immediately since he seemed like a man who would produce more dirt if shaken. Normally, I would act swiftly, but this time, I decided to wait and watch. It paid off when Smith was overheard loudly on the phone behind the store, saying, "I've swiped the goods. How much will you pay for them?" I was shocked. He had been selling off the products he took to friends and acquaintances. This was a clear crime, so I gathered evidence with security cameras, personal cameras, and voice recorders that I had installed. The preparations were already in place, so I used this opportunity to contact headquarters about the situation. Smith turned pale as soon as he realized what I had been up to.
Wait. You knew, and you let me go on. What kind of person are you?
He began to panic, thinking he hadn't been caught. Truth be told, Smith's actions were so suspicious that not only I but other part-timers had noticed. After obtaining their statements, I told him, What you have done is a serious crime. Once I return to headquarters, legal measures will be taken, including but not limited to prosecution. Until then, please wait at home. Oh, and don't worry, you'll get paid for the work you did. But it might all go towards paying for the damages you caused, with a bit of a threat in my tone. I then left to help with the busy registers. In a panic, Smith grabbed my arm.
Wait. Just wait. I have a wife and kids. If I'm fired and sued for damages,
I won't be able to support my family. I only resorted to diverting goods to provide for them. Desperate, he tried to use tears to avoid being fired. However, I ruthlessly shook off his grasp.
Your children.
Aren't they adults and no longer living at home, and the money from the diverted goods? You've been using it for personal expenses, right? I heard you on the phone with a friend or someone saying so.
what?
He made a strangled noise when I hit the mark. Smith was always making calls behind the store, but he spoke so loudly that I could hear everything from inside the office. On one call, he mentioned, "My kids are married and out of the house, so it won't get found out. And my wife doesn't cost much, so I can spend as much as I need." I noted and recorded these conversations. Moreover, Smith frequently spent the money at nightclubs on his nights off, seemingly enjoying lavish nights out.
Your wife probably doesn't know about the diversion or the nightclubs.
Does she? Maybe I should let her listen to the conversations you've had. It's harsh, but it might be better for her to start a new life than to continue being deceived by you. At that, Smith became even more frightened and immediately knelt down to apologize.
Mr. President,
I am terribly sorry. This was all a moment of folly. It started as a way to make a little extra money, and I just couldn't stop. I'll do anything to make amends. Please just don't fire me or tell my family. Despite his pleading, I had no intention of forgiving him.
I'm sorry to see you kneel, but my mind hasn't changed.
If you really want to make amends, then properly atone for your crimes and accept the punishment. That way, you'll truly learn from this experience. As I dismissively spoke, I finally left the office to help with the busy registers. After things settled down a bit, the part-timers asked me, was there something going on with the manager in the office? Peeking into the office, I saw Smith face down on the desk, seemingly burned out. Yes, just a little something, I said casually as I informed the part-timers that it was my last day, and I would be returning to headquarters. After finishing the day's work, I said goodbye to the convenience store and headed back to headquarters. Once back, I verified the arrangements I had instructed my secretary to make and called Smith in a few days later. I sternly reprimanded him again and announced his dismissal on the spot, explaining that he would also be charged for damages. When I mentioned that I would not involve the police if he acknowledged his wrongdoings and made amends, Smith immediately agreed, opting to take on the substantial debt. Smith had initially kept quiet about the incident to his wife, but when I sent audio evidence of his misdeeds at the convenience store and his visits to nightclubs to his home, the ordeal and his dismissal became known. His wife furiously yelled at him and left the house, later sending him filled out divorce papers. His grown children also blocked his contact, leaving him alone. Despite contemplating a job change within the same retail sector, all potential employers rejected him due to the reports I had made. Unable to secure a position in other industries due to his age, he finally resigned himself to working at a construction site, where he was paid well but faced a tough supervisor. Used to slacking off, Smith was harshly disciplined and endured mental anguish daily. However, with no room to change jobs, he continued to endure, slowly paying off his debt while being scolded by his supervisor. After a long time away, I returned to the company and resumed my duties as president. Working in the convenience store after several years was enjoyable, even if it was just for a short period, and I still feel nostalgic about it. This experience led me to think, I should work more often in the field while also conducting inspections. So now I occasionally go undercover to our various stores whenever I have some free time. Although the purpose is to check on things, I inevitably get caught up in the work because it's so enjoyable that I forget about my main responsibilities and immerse myself in the tasks. Moreover, while undercover, I enjoy the thrill of keeping my identity hidden. Almost like playing a game, and I have to psych myself up during breaks to focus on work again. In fact, these undercover missions are incredibly useful as they reveal insights that can only be gained on site, which I discuss with the executives upon returning to headquarters to make improvements. It's been so beneficial that I've been keeping my identity as president as concealed as possible. I'm even planning for other executives and employees to conduct inspections while undercover in the future. However, for now, I want to lead by example and engage in the work myself. I must stress that this is purely to understand the ground realities and not for personal gain. Probably. Putting aside any slight desires, I'm gearing up again today to work undercover at another store.